Good morning and welcome back everybody, it's Arahan here, the Real Estate Nerd. I'm filming this video bright and early today on Friday morning, and like I promised, this week I'm going to be talking about first home buyers and tips and things that you need to know when buying your first home, how you can help yourself along the process, what are the steps you need to take, and what you might be able to pick up along the way to help speed up the process possibly. So for starters, first home buyers, the biggest thing I think you need to sort out is making sure you have your finances in order. So before you can even look at starting to buy your first house, you need to have typically a, let's say, 10% deposit. Now, the best way to work on this, if you are brand new to real estate, you haven't actually owned a property, you don't really know anyone who's owned a property, before when talking to a real estate agent, the first step you need to do is contact a broker. So the reason why I would say don't go to a bank directly is because brokers are typically going to be better at finding you better rates and deals than a bank would offer you as an individual. So first steps, my recommendation would be get a broker. After you get a broker, work out your finances and work to a financial plan with them. Work out how much deposit you need to save, what's your borrowing capacity based on your income, what your goals are, and have a vision of where you want to end up. So do you want to have multiple properties in the future as well? Are you currently studying? Do you want to move forward in your job? There's a lot of things that you need to work out before you even get to the stage of looking at houses. Now, so have a plan in place and speak to a broker so you know exactly what your financial position and outlay would be. Now, if let's say your borrowing capacity is $700,000, I would suggest look at buying houses around the $450,000 to $500,000 mark, because it does two things. First, you're a brand new homeowner. You don't know the amount of things such as all the council rates, all the home insurance problems, all the other things such as water rates, electricity, like all of those things that you haven't had to pay while living at home versus so things that you've had to, when you've been living at home, or things you haven't had to pay for beforehand. These are all things that will come into play as you come into home ownership. Then there's obviously the actual cost of the upkeep of the home as well. So maintenance costs on a home can run a few $1,000s every year as well. These are things that people don't account for. Whatever your budget is, always have a 30% buffer when you're buying. That is a good, easy way to understand what you should be looking at doing, because it does one of two things. It sets you up so that you're not going to be financially stressed regardless of what the interest rates are doing, whether they're going up by 2% or whether they're coming down by 2%. If they're coming down, it's good for you. If they're going up, it's still okay because you can manage the repayments on your loan. The other thing that it also does is it sets you up for success in the future for when you want to upgrade or you want to get more investment properties. Because if you have capacity left in your borrowing capacity, it allows you to then get more equity in the future and go buy an investment property. So doing all of these things actually sets you up for a better future as well. So it's not just about buying your first home, because trust me, there's no such thing as buy a home and live in it for 50 years anymore. Those days are few and far between, and very few people stay in the same place for more than 7 years. The average span of a property before it's bought and resold is about 7 years in Australia currently. So that should give you some idea as to, look, plan in 7-year increments or plan in a decade-like increments, because your needs in your 20s are going to be different to your needs in your 30s, to your 40s, to your 50s, to your 60s, 70s, and 80s. Every stage of your life is going to have different requirements. Now, you might think you know what you know now, but by the time you get to 30, you'll know something completely different, and you'll think, I didn't know anything. By the time you get to 40, you'll go, oh, I don't know anything at 30. So, to start with, the biggest piece of advice, get a broker, get a plan together, and stick under your budget. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Step 2, start looking at properties. Now, once you've worked out what your borrowing capacity is and how much you're actually wanting to take on, and what's that sort of debt profile you want to take on initially to buy a house, start looking at areas, start researching. Now, this is the thing, you can do one of two things here. Now, you can either go focus on your career and your work and do all of those things, or you can employ a buyer's agent. So it's pardon what I do, and pardon what there's other buyer's agents around the country as well. What we do is we do the hunting for you, make sure we figure out what your exact specific requirements are, and we do the due diligence. We make sure that we look up everything that's possibly there is to know about the property, do all the disclosure statements, everything. So we look at future growth predictors, trends, all of those things. It's well, at least I do. I can't speak for other agencies, but I look at things from a very long-term perspective, so that whatever home you buy, it's not just the home you're going to be in for now, but when you sell, you can make a profit on it, or at least be able to break even so you're not taking heavy losses on your property. Now, if you can't afford to hire a buyer's agent, then the other option is you start researching it yourself as well. Now, even before you get to the buyer's agent stage, I would still suggest doing this, which is spend 2 weeks. Just go into different open homes. Don't put in any offers, just go and get a feel for what an area is like. Go and get a feel for what different areas in your budget could be like. And what sort of lifestyle you're looking for as well, because certain suburbs offer certain lifestyle advantages. So for example, if you work closer to the beach and you want to be somewhere equidistant to the beach, and to your work, maybe a more coastal suburb. If you work on the other side of town, which is towards the hills, you have to go, it depends on what sort of lifestyle you want. If you don't mind commuting to work, that's great. If you want to have a short commute to work, you have to look into these things. Figure out what amenities are near you. Are you looking to get married? Are you looking to have kids? If those are things on the cards, then start planning in advance to be in areas where you have access to schools and other services like childcare and good medical. All of these things come into play when you're buying a home, and it just makes those little things in life a little bit easier. These are things that first home buyers often forget to take into account. So, get a broker, work to a plan, stick under budget, start researching. Then you have the two choices. Now, you've been on the market for a couple of weeks, go to as many open homes as you can on a Saturday, get an idea. But now the question comes, do you employ a buyer's agent or do you go buy a property yourself? As a first time owner, look, I personally, if I would have my time over again and I had about 10K as part of my deposit, I would possibly look at borrowing an extra $10,000 to buy a property and pay a buyer's agent to actually do the job for me, because I would then be able to focus all my efforts and my weekends doing what I do best, which is my job and the activities that I enjoy. Now, if you enjoy real estate, fantastic. There's not a problem with that. But you might be buying your first home, whereas buyer's agents like myself, or people who've been in the real estate industry, done hundreds and thousands of transactions in some cases. So we have a lot more experience in these matters because that's what we've specialized in. Just like, for example, if you work in accounting, I'm not going to come and tell you how to do your job. God, I would have no idea. I'd know the basics of, I understand how to read a profit and loss statement, but I wouldn't be able to tell you how to do your job. And even if I could, I wouldn't try to. It's not worth the effort that I would have to put in to learn a brand new skill for no reason. Unless you were interested in that skill. Now, if I was interested in accounting, fantastic. But if I'm not, it's going to be a very different issue. Now, if you can't afford buyer's agent's fees, then here are the steps that you can take to actually secure a property. First of all, start going to open homes, like I said. If you like a house, put an offer in. Now, there's something called an offer letter. An offer letter is not a legal contract. I will make that very clear. Not a legal contract. You can put in an offer so that they understand that this is where you're at. Now, how you make that offer, the best conditions you can possibly offer are, a short settlement period. A settlement period is how long from the moment you sign the contract till the property actually becomes yours. That's what you call a settlement period. So the settlement period can typically, in Australia, it takes about 30 days as a minimum. I've seen properties settle a lot sooner, but those are people who have a lot of cash ready to go. Now, you can do a 30-day settlement period subject to finance. Please do not buy property. If you are borrowing money from a bank, do not make an offer that is unconditional. Okay? Unless you're buying at auction, and even then, unless you are borrowing way under your borrowing capacity. So let's say you're borrowing 500 instead of 700, you've taken my advice, and you have the feasibility to make sure you have that in place. So you need to have your pre-approval from your broker to say, yep, now you can go and start looking at houses. Do not make an unconditional offer. That means you always have subject to finance. What that clause does is it protects you as the buyer in case the bank turns around and rejects your offer, rejects the claim, that it rejects your ability to purchase or borrow money. It rejects your file. So they go, look, they changed their mind for whatever reason, or you've just made a massive error and you've gone and bought a new car at the same time while you're trying to buy a house, you're probably going to get rejected. Your bank loan's probably going to get rejected. So don't go buy a new car when you're trying to buy a house. Like that, you can have one or the other. Don't do both at the same time. Buy the car after you buy the house. That's fine. Do not put down unconditional unless you are absolutely 100% certain that you have the cash ready to go or you're way under borrowing capacity. Again, this is not financial advice, but just me telling you, protect yourself. Aside from that, there are other options that you can put down, such as subject to sale and things like that, but if you're a first-time buyer, you don't have a house to sell, so that point is irrelevant. Always put in for a building and pest inspection. If the real estate agent is pushing to not have a building and pest inspection, walk away from the property. It is a big red flag, and I can tell you, you need to do a building and pest inspection. If you're about to invest $500,000 into an asset, you want to make sure that you spend $500 making sure what you know what's going on with the house. Now, building and pest inspections are not bulletproof, but they do help highlight any issues. Now, you can use those to also negotiate the price down of a property, but it depends on who you're dealing with and what the issues are. For example, common issues that might occur in a building and pest inspection is dirty roofs, cracking in some areas, paint flakes, outside drains not leading to particular places, because those are, builders have been notoriously done that. Those sort of things are wear and tear in a property. Things will break down. There's going to be a moisture. So one of the things you'll hear is moisture in the walls in a bathroom because it's a wet area. Now, is it going to be something that's going to be an immediate detriment? Like, it depends on the level of moisture. If it's so high where your report will tell you. Your report will tell you how bad the damage is. And speak to your building inspector. And get a good one, please, for the love of God. If you need a good building inspector, reach out to me. I will help you connect you with the right people. Because you don't want to get... I've been through this as well, where building inspectors have come in and finished a site inspection in about 15 minutes. Just walk around taking some photos and they're gone. Whereas other scenarios, where building inspectors have spent 2-3 hours going through every little thing that they can. But what it does is it just gives you a better idea about what's going on with the property. So get a building and pest inspection done, always put in for that clause as well. So you've made an offer, the most desirable offer would be, no subject to finance, it would be an unconditional offer, 30-day close, no building and pest inspection, any of that sort of stuff. Those offers are going to be highly regarded, and then people might take lesser money if you do that. But I would advise you against that, because you want to protect yourself and you want to know what you're getting into, especially as a first-time buyer. And if you're doing it yourself, now if you hire a buyer's agent, they take care of all of that for you. They make sure they look at all the building and pest reports, they organize the inspectors, they organize the clauses, they do all of that for you as well. They also help with the communication between your conveyancer. Now this is something I'll get to in a moment. Between your conveyancer and the other seller's conveyancer. Making sure that the entire transaction goes smoothly so that on the day of settlement, everything goes smoothly, you get your keys and you move into your new home. Now if you're buying it on your own, you need to get a conveyancer or a solicitor. Ideally, someone who is a solicitor, because you might be paying a little bit more in legal fees, but in case the deal turns sour, you're better off having a solicitor on board than a conveyancer, because they have a lot more practice. And plus, legally, after a certain threshold, a conveyancer would have to pass your case on to a solicitor anyhow. So, get a conveyancer or a solicitor as a bare minimum. A conveyancer as a preferred option, get a solicitor. Because what they will do is they will look over all the paperwork, they will look over all the contracts, making sure that there is no foul play or bad intent in any of the paperwork. Because at the end of the day, as nice as people are, you need to make sure that all of the boxes are checked off properly. They will also help explain to you what your rights and responsibilities are. Because that's the whole point of this, is that it is a big purchase at the end of the day, and you do have certain rights and you do have certain responsibilities that you need to uphold, such as paying the deposit on time, such as meeting your finance dates, such as meeting all of these dates. Because when you don't live up to the terms of contract, there are penalties that apply. So you need to make sure you are prepared before you go to buy your first home. So let's say you've put in an offer, you get rejected. Don't stop. Don't just put in an offer on one house. Put in an offer on multiple houses, on ones that you like and ones that suit your requirements. Because when you do get accepted, then you can pick and choose which one you actually prefer. A letter of offer is not an intent of, you're not actually buying the property. It's just you've made it clear that you are interested in this property and you would be willing to buy it if we can agree to the terms of a contract. So you can then decide whatever is best suited for you and we can go from there. After that, you then enter a contract. Let's say you found a dream home, you've nailed on the price, you've agreed upon the purchase price. The real estate agency will prepare a contract, send it to you to sign off. Now, before you sign anything, take it to your conveyancer, have a chat to them, make them read over the contract. Once your conveyancer gives you the go-ahead, you can then sign the paperwork. Once you sign off the paperwork, you get 48 hours to 5 days, I believe in some states, to pay the deposit. So the deposit is typically going to be outlined with the contract, and it's usually 10% of the purchase price. So if you had a $500,000 purchase, it would be $50,000 that you'd have to have saved as a deposit. aside from what the next step after that would be, you have a cooling off period. So this is where you do all your due diligence. You read over all the paperwork, your conveyancer goes through everything, make sure that it is all checked out, all your titles are matching up, all the government documents are reflecting the correct information, because I've seen those go wrong as well. The government screws up more often than you realize. So you need to make sure that you have a conveyancer who looks over all of these things and make sure that, you know, your land size is matching up with what they've advertised. You're actually buying the correct block as well. The correct names are on the paperwork, the correct addresses on the paperwork, the correct council rates, all of these things. Once all of that is done, your due diligence period is finished. You then go into the next stage, which is subject to finance clause. Your subject to finance clause is a 14-day period typically, where you then speak to your broker and get your finance formally approved. So you had pre-approval, it then goes to conditional approval within that stage, and then it goes to unconditional approval. So that means the bank has now agreed to lend you the money. And once you sign off on those bits of paperwork, the property is now unconditional. That means you are on to the final step, all the way to settlement. Now during this period, you are now organizing your movers, you're organizing all of those things to basically pack up your life and move into your new home. Then you get to settlement date. Once you get to that date, you get the keys to your house. That's the day you get the keys to your house, after your conveyancer confirms that the money has been given from the bank to then transfer to the seller, and then you get the keys to your new house. That is essentially the steps to buying your first home. Things to look out for when you're buying a first home, if you are trying to do this all yourself, try to look at what the prices in the suburb have trended like over the last few months. Talk to the real estate agents. They're actually pretty helpful most of the time. Look, there are a few shitty real estate agents out there, but on the majority spectrum, I actually feel like a lot of us guys, or a lot of agents, do genuinely want to help. At least the good ones do, in my experience. But I only try to connect with the right people. But talk to the real estate agents, figure out what area is, what the area is doing, what the house is doing, find out about the history, find out about the motivations of the seller. And if it is out of your budget, stick to your budget. Don't need to push yourself. It is your first home, it is not your last home. And if you miss out on a house, it's not going to be the last house. There will always be another house. Just like there will always be another. There's always something new that will come up. And even if you get your dream house in the first go and everything's perfect, after a while you will want to change again. It is human nature to do that. It is perfectly reasonable for that to happen, and if you don't, fantastic, you're one of the 0.01% outliers. But typically, just understand, your first home will not be your last home. It will probably be one of many that you will have in your life. So, those are my tips to first home buyers, and a bit of a general guideline on how to go around getting your first home. Make sure, let me recap that for you. So, first steps, figure out a plan. What do you want your goals to look like in the future? Once you figure out your goals, find a broker. Get a broker, work out your financial goals, work to a financial plan. Once you have that in place, engage a conveyancer/solicitor and let them know that you're going to be on the hunt for a property now. Start researching areas that you like. Once you have figured out the areas that you like, you have two choices. You can either go to try to buy a property yourself, or you can employ a buyer's agent. Once you pick which avenue you want to go down, by all means, you can do it yourself as well. It's a bit more time consuming, but it's your first home. You're 100% entitled to make these choices and be involved in the process as well. Not saying a buyer's agent wouldn't involve you, but they just do all the legwork essentially for you. So let's say you've now found your home. Once you've found your home, you will then make sure that your conveyancer/solicitor reads over the paperwork and the contract before you sign any contracts. Once you've signed the contract, you then pay your deposit. You do the building and pest inspections. Make sure everything lines up in there. If there's anything that you need to negotiate on, such as major fixes, such as broken stairs, things like that, that need to be fixed and addressed before you actually purchase the property, make sure that it is all discussed during that cooling off period. If there is any resistance and you are feeling uncomfortable about the deal, walk away. If you feel uncomfortable about the deal, walk away from the deal, provided it is something that is reasonable, unless it's like first time jitters. If you're having doubts about the first time, look, you can message me anytime on any of my social media platforms or speak to more experienced people. This is why you could also speak to a buyer's agent and make sure that they handle the process for you. Now, after the building pest inspection clauses are met, all of those things are done, you then have to get your finance approved. This is where your broker comes into play. They make sure that your bank approves your loan. Once your loan is approved, you are onwards to settlement to get your final keys. After that, you just start moving into your home and enjoying it, and take time to enjoy where you live. You know, enjoy the space, get a feel for it. It will take some time to feel like, and nothing's going to be perfect when you move in. You are going to find issues that were missed in the building inspection. You are going to find issues that will come up over time. It is inevitable. There is no... If you didn't have any issues, I would be more concerned about that. Just because it sounds too good to be true. Like, I've never had a property transaction where there wasn't something that wasn't absolutely perfect. Every single transaction, because at the end of the day, they're all houses. Everything moves, it creaks, it expands, it grows, it shrinks, everything does. A house breathes. And that causes wear and tear. There is going to be issues, so you need to ideally have a 10 to 30% buffer from what you've borrowed in case of emergency fixes that you might need to make. But aside from that, you should be pretty well okay. If you have any specific questions on how to go about things in your, search for your first home, or what markers to look for, that's going to be my next week's video, where I actually talk about what to look for in a property and what I look at in a property as a buyer's agent as well. So, guys, thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a fantastic day ahead. I hope this video has helped you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.